I don't believe that the Zelensky who won the election is necessarily the Zelensky that we have today. I think that he discovered rather quickly what the regime that he inherited, right, from Poroshenko was, what it was based on, what its foundations were, i.e., the far right, the Banderai fascist battalions, and that's what he was dealing with in the Rada as well, in the security services and so forth. And after some initial attempts at least paying some lip service to the Minsk Accords, I think he very quickly internalized all of this, right? I don't believe that Zelensky was a Banderite fascist, but I think he has completely come to accept that is the regime he has inherited, and he has internalized that, and he has led us on since, right? Zelensky there were in Ukraine now, they banned 16 opposition parties, including, of course, all the parties that really represent the views, the voices of the people of East Ukraine, right? The original Party of Regions was lustrated, and when the new opposition bloc started to outpoll servant of the Zelensky, servant of the people in the polls, boom, its leader Medvedchuk was charged with treason. And it wasn't too long after that the party was completely banned, along with, it must be said, every other real opposition party, right? Anything that is not a Maidan party in the country or completely inconsequential has been banned. And the leaders of the three largest opposition parties were charged with treason, right? Medvedchuk, but even Poroshenko, which is his European Solidarity Party was the Maidan party, right? And it's certainly geopolitically aligned, but there's petty domestic political differences about which are the ruling elite of the Maidan, and that's why he has acted against Poroshenko and charged him with treason, and the West kind of forced them to put that to the side quietly, but there is no democracy in Ukraine. Let's be perfectly clear about that. There is no normal internal political process. What we have right now is factions within the Maidan who, as things have gotten increasingly desperate and the blame game has begun in earnest, are now fighting amongst themselves, right? You have, at the very least, you have the political establishment of the regime led by Zelensky, and you have the military establishment of the regime led by the top general Zaluzhny. And even the New York Times has called it an open rift, right? They're in open conflict with each other. The U.S. has been giving lots of signals, including trying to push Zelensky to hold elections, that it wanted to switch. It had lost confidence in Zelensky for overruling his own generals and making military decisions based on diluted political visions. But also, more importantly, he was ignoring the marching instructions from the NATO planners for the Southern Offensive. And that's what really did it. They would like there to be elections in Ukraine next year, despite the conflict, despite the Ukrainian constitution that says you shouldn't have elections in a time of martial law and war. And it's kind of ridiculous. I mean, first of all, you don't control 20% of your own country. Second of all, you've banned every real opposition party anyway, and silenced all critical media and taken all media under a unified information policy and conducted a pogrom against the largest church in the country. Why bother with elections for show? And the U.S., I believe, wanted to switch horses to Zaluzhny. They wanted to do it in a way that wasn't quite so obvious as another U.S.-backed putsch in the country or coup so soon after the last one in 2000.
And I want to talk about that because last year at this time, Zaluzhny and Zelensky were probably doing rails at the company Christmas party. And this year, We saw the cracks begin to show a while back if people were watching, but it
Yes.
became pretty obvious to the public when Zelensky was still under the influence that the counteroffensive might succeed. And Zaluzhny wrote that really weird op-ed. I think it was in The Economist. And
Yeah,
then,
I
yeah.
need sci-fi weapons to win this conflict.
And then things escalated when recently when Zelensky's camp tried to, or when they dismissed the leadership of this special forces and the military. And then it finally comes to a head even more recently when a member of Zelensky's party publicly called for Zaluzhny to resign. So are we just trying to get ahead of the curve here because we know that the West sort of prefers Zaluzhny at this point?
Yeah.
Or
Yes.
what kind of leader is Zelensky? Is this a military coup? What do we think is going to happen? Like, I'm just not, I'm not really sure. I see Zelensky as like Hitler in the bunker vibes, last leg, especially that time article that was kind of crazy.
Yeah,
And I'm
that
feeling
was
like
a hit.
that was an amazing piece.
I mean, they literally called him deluded.
Yes.
And this is supposedly that you can't tell him that they're losing.
Yes.
This was from a supposed member of his own administration, right? An official, it said, a political official, not a military official. So that's all very interesting. There's been a lot of very interesting articles in the Western mainstream media, and it's quite obvious that the editors of the Western mainstream media have gotten the signals from the White House that Zelensky is now fair game, right? That the shield of false Churchillian heroism that was cast over Zelensky has been removed. And there have been a slew of articles about that. In this rift, obviously the Zelensky admin and a lot of people name Yermak his gray cardinal chief of staff. A lot of people say he's really the leader of the political arm of the regime, not Zelensky. But anyway, that they initiated several things already months ago that they caught wind of this, and they were acting to preserve their power and prevent the U.S. from switching horses to Zaluzhny. And partly also, of course, to tar his image with the Ukrainian public, which, is part of the same thing. One, they initiated an investigation headed by the SBU, the Ukrainian intelligence, into what happened in the beginning of the conflict in the south, in Kherson and Zaporozhye, which basically just fell into Russia's lap. There was hardly any fighting. And honestly, a large numbers of security people were compromised by Russian intelligence, Russian loyalties, and just stood down, right, and had their people stand down. That was a big part of it. It was supposed to happen all over the country. It was probably supposed to happen in Kiev. That was probably the decapitation strike that was planned. It didn't work in Kiev, but it worked great in the south. Worked too well. Russia fell, into Kherson City and other territory that they didn't have enough troops to defend that much territory. They had too much territory in such a short time. When it became clear that Kiev wasn't going to accept any type of political end to the conflict, and it was going to become a real war, essentially, with all of NATO. That's why Russia was forced to withdraw from Kherson City and from Kharkov and concentrate on core areas while they then built up the mobilization force and the mass military contract soldier recruitment campaign was launched that has proved so incredibly effective, and so forth. But they launched this investigation, and it seemed, they're basically accusing the military leadership of not preparing defenses, possibly even of being traitors. And it's obviously designed to end with the finger pointed at Zaluzhny. Everybody sees this. It's routinely talked about in the Ukrainian social media channels and It actually, it's hilarious that it is the SBU conducting this investigation, because actually the most number of anyone, the open people who at that time stood down and defected to Russia within the Kiev regime, military and security services in the south there, it was mostly the SBU. Their own top guy, in Kherson they got his family out of the country, and I don't know whether he's living in Belarus or Russia now or where, but him and his family were gotten out, right? So it's hilarious that it's the SBU conducting this investigation, because they should be investigated more than anyone on what actually happened there. But the other thing that they've launched is, when there was this big media circus that was developed over the military recruiters, the conscription, the press gangs, the commissars, the recruitment commissars, as they are called, how corrupt they were and how much money they were taking to get people out and everything. And if you'll remember, Zelensky fired them all. Right, all of the commissars are gone, which has actually led to part of the horrible recruitment problems they had. But then he charged Zelensky with naming their replacements. So that is obviously a poison pill. It was almost certain that the conscription, the mobilization campaign after that would be a failure, and almost certainly the same corruption would just rear its head again, because Ukraine, and then they would have that also to pin the blame on Zelensky or on Zaluzhny. And of course, the whole failed counteroffensive is going to be pinned on Zaluzhny as well. Although, if anyone should be blamed, it's actually NATO's military planners, because they planned and intelligenced and trained and armed. It was their baby, right? Zaluzhny was just the babysitter.
But how does that work then? How do we position Zaluzhny into a leadership role if we have him to put the blame of the counteroffensive on?
Oh, well, that's what the regime is going to do. But the West is not going to put the blame on Zaluzhny. The West is going to put the blame on Zelensky, because he diverted forces that should have been used in the southern offensive, counteroffensive, to his ill-fated attempts to hold on to and then retake Bakhmut, right? So it will be him, right, that he overrode his noble general and of course the NATO planners and so forth. That appears to be the West's game plan for that. They want Zelensky to be the fall guy, the scapegoat for this all, not Zaluzhny. Zelensky wants to make it Zaluzhny, and who knows what Kirilo Budanov wants, because if anything, I would say he's a possible third vector of power in all of this. And as the long knives have come out, and we saw Zaluzhny's top aide, essentially his chief of staff, Chestyakov, die a few weeks ago in either a moronic accident with a grenade at his birthday party, if you want to go with that story, or a hit by the Zelensky admin, by Yermak, and a warning to Zaluzhny, which is certainly what the Ukrainian social media channels, Telegram and so forth, believe what really happened there. And now Budanov's wife.
Yeah, his wife.
Yeah, well, this is the story. It's not just his wife. It was a number of other GUR military intelligence personnel as well that were apparently poisoned. Evidently their food was poisoned by some type of heavy metal, something, I don't know, mercury, arsenic, something more exotic. They haven't given any details, but evidently and this has been reported in the media before. He's admitted this. His wife, a young haughty trophy wife with artificially inflated lips, if that's your thing. She was living with him in his office i.e., read his secret underground James Bond villain bunker, wherever it is. And she's been living there since the start of the conflict for, because, well, with as many people as he has assassinated in Ukraine and in Russia included, there's so many people that probably want him dead, that he has good reason to fear. So this was obviously a poisoning that happened in the Kiev regime's military intelligence wing, and she simply ate the food that was there and was poisoned with everyone else who was eating that food. I don't think it was deliberately targeting her. But certainly somebody wanted him dead. Could it have been the Russians? Sure, it could have been, right? I don't think that's really their style, but of course that's what they believe in the Western media. But I mean, he's assassinated so many Eastern European officials, that went over to Russia and have been serving in, the Russian-led governments there. The leaders, of course, of the initial uprising against the Kiev regime, from Zakharchenko to Givy, everyone on down, all of those hundreds and hundreds of people they killed. He's been behind a lot of it. So Russia could have done it, but I think it seems a far more likely that this is part of this long knives that's going on within the regime right now, right? I think it's far more likely someone internal wanted him dead. And I don't know what his game is. I don't know who he owes loyalty to, whether Zelensky or Zaluzhny or someone else or just himself, but he's obviously a powerful player in this political game, because there's very few other people that have had as much face time with the Western media, allowed to speak their mind. The other one who has, of course, is Arestovich, the previous presidential advisor, that has since opened his mouth a bit too far and ended up in self-exile. And now he has declared his own essential presidential bid for the elections that Zelensky now says won't happen. And he's been actually preaching that Ukraine needs to peace, that they need to give up. And he's been saying things that would get anyone who is still in Ukraine killed, like admitting to 300,000 dead in the Kiev regime military, admitting that, even within the units of the Ukrainian military, that some 40 to 70% don't want to fight at all. He's been admitting all sorts of things. And his story is now, look, we told you all a lie in order to save Ukraine, right? And I was one of the principal people involved in constructing that lie. But now I'm telling you the truth to save Ukraine, right? So that's a rather interesting little game that Snake is playing there. But if anything else, I think Arestovich is one of the most entertaining and probably intelligent figures that the regime has had, right? He's obviously not a part of it now, but I strongly suggest I remember seeing an interview with him back in on Ukrainian TV in 2016, and he predicted exactly the Russian intervention and how it would occur and where it would occur years ago. That video is still out on YouTube. So I always pay attention to what he says, even with the understanding that a lot of it is and always has been intentional lies. You can get some interesting nuggets of real information out of him, and now more so than ever. So that's another political game or player that is emerging that appears unconnected with anyone else, at least at the moment. But this conflict between Zelensky and Zaluzhny is going to come to a head. Zelensky has been touring around the country, visiting the front lines in the last couple of days, meeting with all the top generals, having a top military council to go over what happened with the offensive and the construction of the defenses from now on. And Who was not there? Zaluzhny. And it's quite obvious that Zelensky is going to attempt to fire him or completely sideline him at the very least sometime in the very near future. And that could get politically explosive in a situation where we thought politics was completely dead in the regime, right? It's not politics as we know it. It's different heads of the beast. And for anyone who thinks that Zaluzhny is a better figure than Zelensky, you're sadly mistaken. Zaluzhny is an actual Banderite fascist ideologue, right? The videos out there, the articles, there was an article in the World Socialist website. Zaluzhny, in his own office, and the pictures that he took, photos and selfies and stuff there, he has 2 busts of Bandera, right? Not just one, because one bust of Stepan Bandera is not enough for Zaluzhny. And he also has one of Shukovich as well. And he has the big red and black banner over his wall that he was taking pictures in. And if you'll remember at the beginning of the year, when the Ukrainian parliament tweeted out the new, the national holiday of Bandera's birthday on January 1st, they tweeted out a picture that was obviously provided them by Zaluzhny of Zaluzhny taking a selfie in front of a portrait of Stepan Bandera. The guy is a real Banderite fascist, not someone like Zelensky, someone of Jewish descent who was a comedian who internalized all of this and fell into this because of Kolomoisky and his stupid TV show. No. Zaluzhny is the real deal. He is a real hardcore Banderite son of a bitch, bastard, right? So don't expect Zaluzhny to be any kind of gift if he ends out on top of this power struggle, which right now he doesn't seem to be doing too well, but we'll see how it goes. Yeah, there we go. There it is. Try to apologize that one away, Western media. Try to tell us again how Zaluzhny is Churchill.